Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mom Your Own Way. I'm Lily Coco, and today I'm talking to my friend Amanda Judd. She's a mom of three boys, and not only that, but she also has three separate birth stories, and more so than anything, her third baby she actually had in the car by herself. I can't wait to hear all the details, so let's just jump in and get talking to her. Hi, Amanda.
Hey.
Hey. Hey. I get a little too stoked. I think when people come on, I'm just like, yeah, it's a party. And I feel like I was going to say 16 at a party. And I was like, I don't think I partied when I was 16.
Just busy doing homework.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're on. I remember, this was months and months ago, but I remember seeing your comment on Facebook about your birth story, and I was like, whoa, this is silly pants. But let's rewind a little bit and get to it. So I want to know about your motherhood and your journey, and I want to know about all the birth stories, but start me at the beginning a little bit, just like your story, and then we'll hop into motherhood. And I want to know everything. I want to know your pregnancies. I want to know your birth stories, definitely the third one. And then I do want to touch on, we chatted a little before, the depression, the anxiety, that overwhelming feeling, the mom guilt, and everything that you went through. I really want to hear about your third birth story. That's just, when I saw that, I was like, that's from a movie. There's no chance that's real.
Right?
How does that happen in real life?
An experience that I don't recommend.
I already want to get to it, but I don't want to skip over all the other stuff that makes you and as a mother and as a person, but I really do want to get to it. So if I jump around, I'm sorry. But let's start with just your story and leading up to motherhood.
So I always wanted to be a mom. Junior high and high school, I took all the child education classes, all that fun stuff. And my thing was, so my mom did home daycare a lot. And so I always had little kids around, and I have 4 sisters.
Okay.
So, and I think there's 20 grandkids. So there's just on my side. So there's a lot of kids and a lot, very big family. And it's been great. And so when we got married, we're we just want to enjoy being married for a little bit. But 6 months in, I found out that I was pregnant, and it was totally unexpected. And then I miscarried.
Oh, no. How old were you when you got married and then had your...
25.
Okay.
So older than a lot of people these days. That's fine. Yeah. I am super open about that too. So if you ever want to talk about that, that's fine.
I want to talk about all of it. It seems like we're going to have to do part 1, part 2, part 3. Because, your experience is 13 different movies. I don't understand how it got all handed to you as one person. You're a heck of a strong girl to be able to handle all of this. And not just once. Things are just kind of put into your shoulders while having a family, while being married, while having your own life. But continue. I want to know more. Go on.
Well, so after the miscarriage, I wanted another baby, and we just kind of decided not to wait. And so we tried for 6 months, and then I got pregnant. And that whole pregnancy, it was a fairly easy pregnancy. Other than the fact that my husband was in school, I was doing online school, and he was doing an internship. So we were living in Idaho for his school, and then he was interning here in Washington. And so we moved here, and then a couple months later we moved back. So we actually moved back to Idaho, away from all my family, when our first son was 2 weeks old. And it was winter in Idaho. I know, it was winter, and so it was you can't really go outside. You don't want to go outside. They were what was it? There's this huge cold chill, whatever.
Cold front?
Yes, that's
cold
it.
Storm, snowstorm.
It was cold, and it hurt your face.
Okay.
So there's this huge thing going on, and they're don't go outside for too long. Make sure you're bundled up for risk of frostbite. And I'm I can't bring my 2-week-old baby outside.
Heck no.
And so, postpartum definitely, depression definitely set in. I struggle with depression anyways.
Oh, really?
So I was already like on high alert, and I had my husband read like all these different articles on what to look for and the different signs, because I'm like, if I don't see it, somebody else needs to see it, and you need to be aware.
Wow. That's so smart to be so open. I mean, certain things were out of your control, like moving away from your family, the
Hmm.
winter in general gets to people, and then having a newborn and moving, like, there's just so much that was put on your plate to begin with. But then just that part, that period right after giving birth, I feel like nobody really talks about, and then moms usually just kind
Hmm.
of go away because they're dealing with it, and it's kind of just ignored. But how was it for you, and what were the signs that you guys read about so we can tell others to look for them?
There was like, it wasn't, I mean, there's the obvious, like, you don't want anything to do with your baby. You don't, you know, you don't want to get out of bed. You just cry all the time. The obvious, or like the more known things. Um, but for me, I was completely opposite. I couldn't have my baby out of my sight. If somebody else was like looking at my baby, I was like, don't touch him, don't touch him. Like, I went the opposite and was with him 24/7 because I was scared of being a bad mom.
Okay, when you first gave the signs, I was like, man, I think I'm the opposite, but I don't think it was like that effective because I also just wanted to be with my baby after I didn't want like almost
Right.
anyone to hold her. I felt incomplete when I wasn't holding her.
Yep.
But I thought maybe that was just like a first time mom thing, but
And
I didn't really see it as
it's part of what's not
wow.
talked about a lot is postpartum anxiety. Depression is
Mm.
talked about a lot, but it's part of the anxiety part of, you're the only one that can do this.
Oh my
And
gosh,
you are,
that's exactly what I had had.
you're the mom, and yes, you are the only one that can do a lot of stuff, but your husband can still hold the baby and nurture him, like nurture the baby and take care of the baby.
Yeah.
Um, and he would like hold him and I'm like, watch his head. Don't do, like, careful, careful. He might be cold. You should put a blanket on him. Like, oh, that's his cry. That means this and this. And he's like, how do you know that? I just know,
Yeah.
but
Well,
you have to do this.
you do know that as a mom, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's reasonable to give those little advice. I can see how it could be. I was running after my husband with the little baby socks. I was like, "We gotta put socks on her. She's gonna be cold," which I know I was so annoying about. But I'm like, maybe I had that anxiety. I think I thought this whole time maybe I was just a little like helicoptery, but I didn't. But I can now listening to you. I'm like, yeah, those are all the symptoms, and those are all the things that I
Yep.
recognize in myself.
And part of it is just like my oldest is 5, and I'm still like, I don't want to leave him for too long. I don't put him, like, I don't send them to babysitters. My parents and maybe 2 other people are the only people that have ever watched him, and it's never been for more than like a couple hours.
Yeah.
Um, and like, that's my choice. I know some people are like, here, take my kid, and that's fine too. Like, if you trust the person, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't like to be away from them. And when I am away from them, I'm like, I wonder what they're doing. I hope that they're okay. Like, and so I'm very particular about who watches them, and for like,
Yeah.
you know, which I think part of it is normal motherhood stuff. But I know for me, it's almost like it physically hurts to
That's
do it.
so interesting because I've kind of struggled naming that and I guess putting a name on it because I resonate with that 100% where I, even thinking about the future, I'm just like, I don't want her to be away. People talk about like, oh, her spending the night somewhere doing this. I'm like, why would she be away from us? We love her having in bed with us. We just love being around her. I never want to be away from my baby. I want to homeschool her. And I kind of feel bad about it. I'm like, I don't want to occupy all of her time, but I also don't feel secure enough letting her go and letting strangers watch her or daycare. I mean, she's not out of my sight only for an hour for the podcast or if I have to get something done for work or anything. But the most amount of time I've ever spent for her has been an hour. And I guess to me, I just thought it was normal, but I struggled understanding how other moms are able to separate themselves to go back to work or
Hmm.
whatever they need to do. And I can't do it. I don't know how moms do it, but I've never been able to like name it, I guess. I just thought that's how it was.
Yeah.
How interesting.
I was shocked because nobody ever really talks about it. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. And it wasn't until my second that I realized that it was more like anxiety ridden. And like everyone says, the kids have, what is it, stranger danger and, um, oh my gosh, what is the word for it? They, attachment, like they don't want to leave.
Oh,
I am so brain dead right now.
man, I'm now lost. Not insecurity, attachment. No, whatever. I know what you're talking about.
Whatever
I'm
it's
gonna
called.
remember it at 3 in the morning. I'm gonna sit up and be like, "This is
Yes, I'm gonna be up like nursing the baby. Like, oh,
yeah." Man, now I'm stuck thinking separation anxiety.
yes, yes.
I give myself a gold star. Yes, thank you.
And nobody talks about like the parents have separation anxiety, and I am 100%. I'm like, I have more separation anxiety than my kids do. My kids will go up and like play and be like, okay, bye, mom, see you later, and I'm like, oh, but.
How interesting. I thought, because I totally recognize myself in that. And I know I'm going to struggle with it later because even I'm learning to let go slowly. I've talked about this before. But I know I'm going to struggle letting her, like, go and do like I want her to be so independent, but I also want her to be like, hey mom, do you want to come along for everything for the rest of my life? And I'll be like, yes, and I want to write that contract so it's in writing so she never leaves me.
Yes.
Because I'm needy like that.
Like I just signed my first kid up for kindergarten, and I'm like, since he was born, I'm like, I am homeschooling. I don't like the school systems here. I'm homeschooling. And then we found a really, really good school that he got into.
Okay.
And I'm like, if he gets into it, I'll let him go to school. If not, I'm homeschooling because I'm not doing like the school systems here.
It's scary what's out
like
there right
that's
now.
just my own personal thing.
Yeah.
And then he got into it, and I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna. No. And so I decided to let him choose, and he's very much a mama's boy. So I'm like, I'll just let him choose. And he goes, Mom, I want to go to school and make friends. I'm like, okay.
What a moment. Did you feel like so proud of him for making that choice and also so sad that he didn't choose
Oh
you
yeah.
almost?
Oh yeah. And then he goes, but you're gonna be there with me, right? I'm like, well, no, I'm gonna drop you off and you'll play, you'll have a new teacher, you'll do this and that. And then when school's over, I'll pick you up and you'll come back home. And he goes, okay. Yeah, that's okay, Mom. I can do that. Yeah, that's okay. I want to do that. And I'm like,
That's so admirable,
okay.
and you want to like just applaud and be like, yes, because you're such a big boy, and I'm so proud of you. And then you're like, but don't leave me.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, so that's going to be your first one that you're separating from, right?
Yep.
Big steps.
Oh yeah. I'm not looking forward to it.
No. But I would guess that taking this one step, it'll set you up for other big steps. They'll constantly talk about growing pains for like kids, certain things that they have to go through and then, the pain that comes from it. But there are certain steps and milestones they have to hit and learn. And I always think it's like, as a parent, I go through those growing pains. Like there's certain learning moments and steps that I have to like learn and adjust and say, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Okay, we're taking this step. Okay, I can do this. I can do this. Oh my God, I can feel the anxiety within me. I so totally have the anxiety. I like have to prep myself emotionally to like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I think
to an extent, like every parent, everyone has anxiety. It's just sometimes it's like more so than others.
Yeah. I recently learned that a lot of our anxiety isn't necessarily our own, and it's passed down through DNA that we might not even be aware of. They did like the study with the animals and certain things that we learned through DNA. And so it could be just an accumulation of a lot of anxiety from like even my grandma and whoever, and so it's just added on. And so maybe I should just learn to start addressing it and treating it. It's like, okay, so this voice in my head, is it me really speaking or is this the anxiety? And trying to identify it to maybe help me along.
That's what I had to do with signing my oldest up with, because I'm like, do I want to homeschool him because I think it's the best and I truly want this for him. And yes, like I would love to homeschool him, and I do think that there's a lot of pros to it. A lot. But I'm like, but am I doing this because of me, or am I doing this because like I truly think that it's the best move for him?
Yeah.
And when I put that aside and I'm like, I don't know that I'm not doing it selfishly, then I was like, okay, I'm going to give him the choice.
Wow. That's so, I guess, big of you, you know, to address that. And it's silly, but I also want to be like, okay, I don't want to like get my daughter stuck in like a Stockholm syndrome where she just feels like she needs to be stuck at home with me just because I want to be home with her. I want her to have friends and explore and do all these things, but I also selfishly, and because I'm needy with her, I don't want her to leave. I love her so much. I think she's so cool. I don't know if I'm going to be ready.
My husband's like, well, it's like your first one. It's his first step to leaving the nest. And I'm like, shut your face. Don't say that. He's not leaving my nest.
No one's leaving a nest. We are building him a nest next to ours.
He's kind of, and I'm like, no, he's not. He's coming home every day. He's not leaving my nest. Stop it.
That's hard to hear. Oof, girl. Okay, so tell me about your second pregnancy and second, I can't believe you have 3 boys.
Oh, me neither. If someone said you're gonna have all boys, like when I was younger, I'd be like, no way, I'm gonna have all girls.
Raw.
No, I'm not. So his was pretty simple. So the first one, his birth was so long. His delivery,
really?
It was so long, like over 36 hours, pushed for 2.5 hours. It was ridiculous.
See, he never wanted to come out of the nest. He's not going to want to leave your nest. He likes the nest. He doesn't want to be pushed out.
Exactly. And he's still such a mama's boy. I love it. But, so then he came out and like, they tried to pull the placenta out and the umbilical cord crumbled. And I'm like, what in the
What do you mean crumbled?
It just like broke in the doctor's hands. Like it was failing.
Isn't it like a rubber? It looked like a rubber tube, like a.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Like it just like he like tugged on it a little bit and it completely broke. Like I'm like, what in the world? And the nurse goes, "Oh, oops." Like they could tell that his heart rate was going up and down.
I've never heard of that.
And they just were like, "Oh, you know, he's just ready to come out." I'm like, oh, you just need to stew a little bit. And so they'd like turn Pitocin off and they do this and do that. And it was so long and so miserable.
I'm so sorry.
And then like the umbilical cord broke and they're like, oh, oops. I'm like, oops, that was like my kid's lifeline right there, literally. So I mean, he was fine, but that was like a scary moment. And then the doctor was impatient for the placenta to come out. He's like, well, start prepping her for surgery. And I'm like, wait, what? And so finally they got it out and it was fine. And I didn't have to go do surgery.
How did they get it out? Did you push
it out? He shoved his whole hand up there, like up to his elbow and scraped
I'm picturing like a turkey where you're like stuffing the turkey.
And I'm just like sitting there and I'm like...
I'm so sorry.
Like, that does not feel good. I'd rather push another baby out.
Why are they so aggressive? Why are they so aggressive at the hospital? I feel like they just don't care. And they're just like, let me break the cord. Let me just...
Yes. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That sounds awful.
It was not pleasant.
So sorry. Did they ever explain the whole crumbling thing? I don't understand.
No, they just said it looked like it was failing, and it's good he came out when it did.
Well, yeah, of course, because he went. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it's good that he came out, guys. Thanks. What a good doctor evaluation. Did you ever look it up or anything?
No, I was too scared.
Yeah, true. Have you heard of anyone else like a similar story?
I've never heard of anybody else.
If anyone's listening, if you can comment, if you've ever heard of anything like this, I want to know, because what the heck? We got to get to the bottom of this.
Yes. So then my second one, I was sick a lot with him. And so I'm like, oh, I'm totally sick. It's a girl. And then we do the anatomy scan and it's another boy. And I'm like, okay, so he's just high maintenance and makes me sick all the time. And, and his birth was actually a lot better. So I decided to go to a midwife, with my second. And I'm like,
Sorry, like a birthing center?
So it was still at a hospital. It was just a midwife instead of an OBGYN.
Okay.
And so I was like, I don't necessarily want like the natural birth. I'm not opposed to it, but I am also not opposed to that epidural. And so we did that, and we get there and she's like, all right, you're like a 7-ish right now. And I'm like, I want the epidural. Like I said, I didn't know, but I changed my mind. I know what I want, and I want the epidural. Like,
I wonder if they ever do bets of like, okay, she said no epidural. Let's see how long it'll be until she's, screams for the epidural, like within the hospital. Right? Like I would just make bets.
Oh yeah. Like, oh, she said she wants this, but her pain tolerance isn't very high. So,
I thought my pain tolerance was really high, but once that Pitocin was in me, and then later I found out that actually increases your pain, I really couldn't handle it. I know I've heard from a lot of people that if you go fully natural without the Pitocin, it's a whole separate thing. And so, but with the Pitocin, and then I thought I wasn't going to make it. I was like, there's like a car trying to drive out of me. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like no words to explain it.
For some reason, before I gave birth, I was trying to like imagine the pain. I'm like, okay, well, a thing is going to come out, and of course things are going to open and kind of stretch, and you're going to push, and you kind of like, try to figure out to kind of imagine it. And what it was so far, 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 far from it. I had pain where I didn't know I had body parts or pain. Yep. And it's
You're
so
like,
hard.
Oh, there's a muscle there?
Yeah. And it was in like these weird places. And I at some point I was like, just cut my body open. Just like cut it off so I don't feel it anymore. Because it was just so extreme. And for me, like I started shaking, and then I got freaked out because like the high blood pressure was up and down. But it's intense. It's really scary. And then when they make an announcement like they did to you, like, oh, sorry, the cord broke. So on top of the pain, you're like sitting there with that anxiety. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So then it was not fun. So like the second one, he's crowning, and I can't do it anymore. I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep. Just cut me open and get him out. And they're like, you really don't want us to do that? I'm like, I really do. Just cut me open. And they're like, you just need like one more push and he's out. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. Just cut me open.
Wow.
And he was my second. Before this, I had never left my first with anybody. And so it was nighttime, so I had to wake him up and drop him off at my parents' house and leave him overnight. And I was like, I don't know what to do. He was 2 weeks early, so I was planning on having like 2 more weeks to be able to have baby him as the only child and everything else. And so I just wasn't ready for it. And so I can't do it. I'm done. I'm tired. I haven't slept. I just cut me open and get him out.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you really just need to push. So I pushed, and he was here, and everything was fine.
How's the transition from the 1 to the 2, especially if you didn't get, it abruptly ended up, kind of?
Well, so it went a lot smoother than I thought.
Okay. Except
in the hospital. So I was it strep B positive?
Like for strep throat?
You look confused.
For like the bacteria thing that they do? Okay, yeah. I'm back on. Yeah, I did look confused. I was like, you got strep throat in the middle of it? Dumb.
No.
Okay.
And so they want to get like 1 or 2 rounds of antibiotics before you have the baby.
Okay.
But because my labor went pretty fast, they didn't have time to get any antibiotics in. And so I had to stay at the hospital for 3 days. so that they could monitor him and make sure he didn't contract anything.
And you had to be
And
away from your
so,
baby, from your firstborn.
yes,
Ah,
yes.
ah.
And so I was a mess, and I was convinced that they were going to send a social worker in to come take my baby because I was a mess and I couldn't hold myself together. And they didn't have, they told me not to bring my antidepressants, but then they didn't put it in the system. So I didn't get them. And so, like, I didn't have my medication for 2 days. And then it was just a mess with that. And so,
And both
all
of your
the
babies were taken
extra
away.
hormone surge, and
Yeah.
so I was convinced that because I was such a hot mess, they were going to come take my baby away.
Ugh.
And so he was still in the room with me. They didn't take him, but I thought that they were going to, because somebody comes in and she goes, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "I just want my baby." She's like, "Well,
Ah.
honey, he's right there." And I'm like, "Not that one, my other one at home."
Was
I'm
your
like,
son able to visit you at all during those
he was,
days?
he
Okay,
was.
that's good.
So it was before all of the COVID and everything else. So he came in the next day, and um, I had, I hear my baby out here right now. Um, he came in the next day and he met him, and I had read beforehand, like, to help with the sibling transition. Don't be holding the baby when your other kid comes in, because
Mm,
so he was not even 2 yet. I think he was 20 months when our second was born.
wow.
So almost there, but not quite 2. So he didn't fully understand what was going on.
Mm.
And so I was worried about him being upset over this baby. And so I left the baby in the little bassinet that they have. And he came in and he was able to run in, he went, "Mama," and jump on my bed and give me hugs and kisses. And we snuggled and talked for a little bit. And then he looks over and saw the baby and he goes, "Oh, baby." I'm like, "Yeah, the baby came out of my tummy." And he's like kind of looking at me all strange. And he looks at the baby and he's like, "Oh, baby." And so we picked the baby up. And so that way he was able to come in and get me and not like, "Oh, I'm taken, like my place is taken,"
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that worked out really well. And then we've got like pictures. He's just like sitting there holding the baby and like so much joy and pride in his eyes. And I'm like, oh.
That's so sweet.
And it's so crazy because like I hadn't seen him for 24 hours, but after holding this tiny newborn, he comes walking in and I'm like, "You look like you're 10." Like,
You grew up in the 24 hours.
yes,
Oh,
and it's so crazy. But so then that was, he's Ethan, my oldest. He's always been very loving and very sweet. And so my biggest concern was he was going to like smother the baby because he was trying to give him too many hugs and just sit there. And so he'd like sit there in the car seat next to him and hold the baby's hand and he's like, "Oh, baby." It is
that's so
so sweet.
sweet.
And it melts my heart. And to this day, they're, they fight, but they're best friends and it's so sweet.
Wow. I love
So,
that so much. I it's hard listening to your story because I try to put myself in the position and I'm like, man, that's a lot of feelings. That's a lot of emotions to
mm-hmm.
just get through. Giving birth on its own is hard. Separating from your kids is hard. When you don't have the right medication that you actually need, it's hard. There's so
On
many things
top
that are
of like
just,
the hormonal surge of labor and
yeah.
yeah.
Girl. Girl.
it's
Okay.
it's not ideal.
No. And so how is it coming home now with a baby and almost 2-year old? How is that transition?
That was a lot easier than
Yeah.
having one baby.
Mm.
Because I was already up and going. Like I didn't have a chance to just kind of sit down and mope and do whatever. My husband was able to take like a week off of work.
Mm.
And so he was home for the first week and then he was back at work and it was back to everything. And I had friends, they brought over groceries
Wow.
and a couple meals to just like pop in the oven. One of my friends brought over like corn dogs and freezer cheeseburgers and chicken nuggets that I could just kind of put in the microwave and give to the toddler and like, here
So
you go.
helpful.
And it was
So
great.
helpful. Yeah.
And so while I'm nursing the baby, I could be like popping something in the microwave for a couple minutes to get the other one food until I could actually like get him something else.
Yeah. Had
So
you,
it was,
sorry, when did you finish breastfeeding your Ethan? Because how was that transition and then starting to feed the baby? Was there any like, hey, why did I finish breastfeeding
so
and not
I
the
was
baby?
already pregnant when I stopped breastfeeding Ethan.
Okay.
So he weaned himself basically at 17, almost 18 months.
Tell me more about it because I am in this anxiety of my baby's starting to eat, and so my milk has decreased, and I'm like, do I do more? Do I do less? What do we do when we stop? I can't think of not breastfeeding her because that I'm so used to it, I
It's
guess.
what you did from day one.
Yeah, and I saw this video of this mom saying bye to her baby, not bye to her baby, but like saying bye to breastfeeding for the last time. It was so sweet. She's like, I'm sorry, today's the last day we have to do it. Like, this is our last time. I'm so proud of us for doing it. I'm gonna cry. Like, and she was just being
So
grateful
my
for doing it was so beautiful, and she was just saying how proud she was of her son and herself for doing it for so long. And he was just like, well, why, mommy? Like, he was so, oh my God. He was so sad that they were going to stop. And I don't know how I'm going to, I don't know how I'm going to stop with my baby. I don't know how I'm a mess.
So the night that he turned, like the night before his first birthday, I just laid in bed nursing him and bawling because I'm like, he's not a baby anymore. Like, this is going to be the end. And I was bawling. And I just decided, I'm like, I'm just going to nurse him until he wants to stop. Because, like, whether that's selfish of me, like, because I don't want it to end or what. But, and so he would nurse a couple times, like here and there throughout the day. And then he wanted his sippy cup. So I'm like, okay, here's your sippy cup. And then he would nurse before nap and before bed. And he'd nurse to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then it started like easing up and he would nurse for shorter periods of time until one night he just like wasn't pulling at my shirt for it and he just fell asleep. And I'm like,
I'm so scared when that day comes.
I waited for him to ask or like for him to look for it kind of thing. And he didn't look for it one night. I think I wore, instead of like a easier access shirt, I just wore like a t-shirt. So everything was hidden and he didn't see it and he didn't ask for it. And he just laid in my arms and fell asleep. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And part of it, I think, is I was already pregnant, so my milk was starting to dry up. And he just stopped. And then I had like 6 months, and then I was nursing again. So
I'm thankful because it seems like a smoother transition instead of he was still nursing and then you have to explain to him like, hey, I'm sorry, I have to stop nursing you because now this new baby is going to replace that space.
I was planning on tandem.
Really?
I was like, if he still wants to nurse at night, I'll let him nurse at night. Like,
yeah. I've seen some people who nurse like 3, 4, and I know it's so beneficial and I want to keep it going as long as I can. So I'm going to let it go until I'm so not ready for that day.
My sisters would always laugh at me. Like, I mean, they were like, go for it, whatever, but they would laugh at me and they'd reference, have you seen Grown Ups? The movie, it's got Adam Sandler in it.
A long time ago. They like go on like a trip or something, right?
Yeah. So there's this one kid and he's like in elementary school and still nursing and stuff. And and the mom's like pumping to feed a baby bird that got injured or whatever, and he's like, Mom, you're gonna suck and dry, or he's gonna suck you dry. And he'd like come up and like just come up and start nursing whenever and whatever, and they're like, Ethan's gonna be like that, like worried. And I'm like, whatever, leave me alone.
That's really funny. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
No, I haven't.
There's a scene similar to it, but this kid's like 7. He's sitting on this like queen's lap, and she's just like holding this big old boy, and he's supposedly nursing. And I'm just like, okay, that's too old. He's a big old boy, and she's just like, this is what we're doing.
I used to say, like, I mean, before having kids, I was like, when they can ask for it and like find it themselves, then it's too old. Yeah. And then I had my kid, and it's like 6-8 months, and they're like pulling at your shirt, asking for it and trying to get to it. And I'm like, okay, that's not too old.
Yeah.
He's not even a year.
Yeah. Did you, for the sippy cup, did you do milk? Yeah. Or just water? Just regular milk? Okay.
Well, we started with water, and then after he turned 1, we'd give him some milk in there, and he really liked it. Yeah. And so that was it.
I'm not ready for it. My daughter drinks water right now, but we still like nurse to sleep, and we just nurse throughout the day and stuff. And I know it's coming. I know it's coming. I'm not ready for it.
I have thought about getting like the milk jewelry. Have you seen that?
Oh, I've seen that, where you can get your breast milk in like a ring.
Yes, I've thought about doing that, or you can do like a necklace or something like that. And I'm like, maybe I'll like save some and do that. Yeah. Because you can keep it in the freezer for a couple years until you save up the money for it or whatever. But
yeah. I'm a mess today.
You're fine. It's emotional.
I saw that video I told you about last night, and my daughter was falling asleep. She had just fallen asleep, and I was just laying there bawling with her, because I, of course, put myself in that situation of having to say goodbye to it with her, or trying to like explain to her why we can't nurse anymore. And I just bawled myself to sleep last night. Like it's that emotional. It's that whole connection. Like,
yep.
From birth, it just, there's so much behind it. And I started kicking myself in the pants, because she's older now, so she like scratches and kicks and flips and bites and this, and I'll get annoyed of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, when are we gonna stop this? But then, all of that, none of that matters, because like I'm so thankful that we like stuck to breastfeeding, and because I really struggled at the beginning, and now I'm a mess, so that's where I'm at.
Well, with my third, he just turned 1, and so he does like, he'll do flips and pull and stretch, and I'm like, dude, you can't do that.
It's attached to me.
They're not made to bend and stretch that way. Stop.
Yeah, it's like silly straw to them, and I'm just like, it doesn't go that way. It's attached. Yes. All right. I'm sorry for being a mess, but thank you for sharing.
Don't apologize.
I'm glad that it went smoothly for you in that transition.
Yes.
Through breastfeeding. But go on about now with your second at home.
So I nursed him for 20 months. And again, he just kind of, like, at that point, I was a little bit done. He was almost 2. I hadn't had my body back to myself since being pregnant with Ethan. And so I was like, okay, I'm a little bit over it, but I also don't want to stop this. And so for Colson, I would nurse him at night, and I would nurse him for nap. And then nighttime, as he was more just kind of like playing with it and using me as a pacifier, I'd unlatch him. Okay. And then just kind of snuggle him. And so he still got the snuggles. He was still loved on, but I wasn't his pacifier anymore. And we did that until he just kind of, he stopped.
On his own?
Yep. He stopped on his own. And
did you feel like that day was coming? Did you kind of, or did it? Yeah.
I could see it coming, because he would nurse shorter and shorter periods of time. until he was down to like nursing for a minute. And then he'd kind of like latch off and put his head on my shoulder and we'd just snuggle. And so I'm like, okay, so I was mentally, emotionally preparing myself for this. And I'm like, it sucks and it's hard, but also I'm kind of enjoying just like sitting here and snuggling him and having my body back to myself.
Yeah.
And
I'm trying to remind myself when it does happen. Like, there's so many things I have to cut out of my diet because of breastfeeding. So, watching my coffee, gluten, we've cut out sugar, we've cut out oats. And so I'm like, oh, I can reward myself with like donuts and 47 coffees and just go like I can do whatever I want, eat whatever I want at that point. But then when I think it through, I'm like, it's not worth the breakup now. So it's just, but I do want my body back. It's just constantly right now being on demand it was something so unexpected.
Exhausting.
Yeah, to be so needed. And so I know there's benefits. It's just, it's going to be emotional.
It's rewarding and it's fantastic, but it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So then with, oh my gosh, what was I about to say?
Were you already pregnant when you stopped?
Oh, that's it. No, I was not.
Okay.
And so everyone says like when you breastfeed, you lose weight. Like your body's burning calories, blah, blah, blah. You lose so much weight. My body holds on to weight and gains weight. And so I'm like, gosh. And so I was finally like losing weight again. And then I got pregnant again. And so I'm pregnant with my third. I was so sick with him, like throwing up every day.
Pregnancy? Oh, dang.
The entire pregnancy.
More so than your second?
Yes.
Ugh, girl. Okay.
And it was so rough. And I lost like 30 pounds while I was pregnant with him.
Wow. Just from like being sick?
Being sick. My body like is weird. I lose weight when I'm pregnant. I think with my first, I might have gained 5 pounds. But then like I gained 10 pounds after.
I think you're supposed to naturally, because you're supposed to like comfort the baby. You're supposed to have this like the curves and the snuggles and the coziness. I think moms are supposed to.
My body just doesn't. It like gains weight afterwards and then holds it, and it won't, like, no matter how much I cut, no matter how much I like work out, I cannot lose the weight. And it's so frustrating because I'm like, this is obviously not where I want to be. And
I'm sorry you don't feel confident in where you're at. You look beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to be back to, when I thought I was fat in high school. But at
you
the
can't
same
compare
time,
yourself to your high school days.
I know.
I'm like, I definitely shouldn't compare myself to high school days. That was a mess. We wore like blue eyeshadow. It was so weird. The teenagers now are so much cooler. Like I can't even imagine being a teenager
like,
today.
Oh, let's contour, and I'm like,
I know, what? Right? I can't do
that.
I
you
can't
need
do the makeup
orange
tricks.
cakey foundation. Like,
right? What about those like clips we wore in the hair and like the hair bands? And the little bang,
the springy butterfly.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They need all that. Although they're probably coming back around to it because they're already doing the flare.
That's true.
They're doing the big curls. They're gonna get to the perm. They're gonna get to the feathers in their hair. They're all gonna get to it.
You know what I saw? I was looking at like clothes on Target, and I saw the bandana tops, like the. You know what I'm talking about? Where
they're going to love them. They're going to love them. Yeah, we already did this.
What in the world?
We already did this. Mm-hmm. They think they're cool. It
makes me feel so old.
Yeah, it's hard because now with social media, you see everything. And sometimes, because I still feel like I'm, you don't feel like you really change unless you like look back and you're like, oh, shoot, that was 10 years ago. That was 20 years ago, whatever. So I'm not saying I feel 16, but like, just kind of get stuck somewhere in your 20s. You kind of just always feel like you're 25, 26, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not how old I am. But looking at social media, and when you do see the 16-year-olds, you're like, at least for me, I'm just like, man, y'all are grown up.
You're 10.
Yeah, they look like kiddos.
With like really good makeup.
Really good makeup. Really good makeup. What the heck? I don't know how they're doing it. I can't do it. I was never good at eyeliner. But they are just doing it.
The false lashes and the
All of it. They're like doing courses on it. They could teach me, I'm sure. But like, they've got the 37 brushes. They do all the different things. I don't even have a brush. I use my hands. I use one thing. I'm proud of them. You know what? I'm proud of them. They're putting in the work, so good for them.
Yeah.
It's just, can you imagine, like, if somehow in time we could take, like, our high school and then a high school of today and they met up for, like, a game? And then people are like, whoa, you're from a different time.
If we did high school with, like, somebody in the 60s.
Yeah. Ooh, weird.
Yeah. I don't like that comparison. Take that back.
Yeah, it's weird how much things have changed. Oof. Okay. I wonder what it'll be like in 30 more years when our kids are, like, pregnant and families.
I don't know.
I don't know what they're going to be into in the metaverse. I don't know. It's going to get weird.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to get weird. Okay, well, let's talk about so now you're with a second. And then you got pregnant with a third. Mm-hmm. And you got really sick.
Then, yes.
Okay.
So then so we were dealing with COVID and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So with I was like, I do not want to be in the hospital more than I have to. Mainly because I don't want to be away from my kids. And so I went back to the midwife and I told them I'm going to do a natural birth. I want a water birth. I want to go to the midwife center because they'll keep me for like 12 hours. And if everything's good, they send me home. And I have to go back the next day to check on baby and, do that. And like, I have to do the temperatures and keep up on the stats.
Okay.
But I can do it all at home. And so I'm like, okay, no epidural. I didn't really like how they made me feel afterwards anyways. I'm going to do it natural. So I had planned on doing it natural. We were going to drive to the midwife center, but then it snowed and we got snowed in. And so, and then that weekend passed. And then the next weekend, I ended up going into labor. So we didn't know where we were going. And it's like, where it's at is like a maze of one-way streets and no U-turns and it's so confusing. And so I ended up packing my bags in labor and everything else.
Like your water broke and you said...
It had not broken yet. So
how'd you know you were in labor? Just
contractions.
Thank you.
That morning, I was like sitting on a yoga ball just because it's comfortable. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like that's a contraction. And then they just kind of stopped. And so I'd started like having symptoms, like, losing the plug and stuff like that. But you can do that like a month before and it'll regenerate.
Wow.
And so it's not necessarily like a for sure, okay, you're going into labor symptom.
Okay.
But I started that and then I was like, okay, well, if I do go into labor, it's going to be tonight and I'm tired. So I'm going to take a nap. So my husband was working home at the time. And so he kind of quit work early and watched the boys, the older two, so I can take a nap. And I slept for like 3 hours. So clearly if I was having contractions, they weren't hard.
Yeah.
And I woke up and my mom's like, hey, do you think it's going to happen today? And I'm like, nope, I'm good. She was okay, cool. So, and then I stand up and I like walk around a little bit and I'm like, whew, okay, it's happening.
Wow.
The contractions were just coming and my husband's like, are you okay? Like, how far apart are they? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't timed them.
I was taking a nap.
I was like, I haven't timed them yet. Like, it's been 5 minutes. I'm sure they're not that close together.
Yeah.
And then like another one started. And he's like, you should probably start timing them. I'm like, okay, fine. So I timed them and it's like 30 seconds to a minute and a half apart. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I
Did you
called
start
after
panicking?
hours a little bit because I hadn't packed my bag yet.
Sorry. That's so funny.
The first
I didn't pack.
the first one, it was like 32 weeks. Okay, I have to pack my bag. The
Mm-hmm.
second one, I'm like, okay, here's a list. Like, this is where all the stuff is. I just have to throw it in the bag. And then the third one, I'm like, it was 38
You
weeks
took
in
a
a day.
nap.
I know. I was like, I should pack the bag, but I'm tired. And if I'm going to be up all night in labor, I need a nap.
Yeah, smart.
And so I hadn't packed. And the after hours nurse is like, oh, okay, well, yeah, come in. Oh, I don't know if you're going to make it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make it. What are you talking about? Like, not making it is it's not
Yeah.
an option. And she goes, okay, well, if you're on the way and you don't think you can make it, then just go to the nearest hospital. And I'm like, okay, cool.
How far away was it from your house?
About an hour.
A day. Okay.
So um, we're driving, and there was one hospital on the way, and we get there. We're almost there. We're like at the exit, and I'm like, I am not making this. Like, we need to go to a different hospital. And I called, and I'm like, hey, can I speak to labor and delivery? And they, oh, we don't have a labor and delivery here. And I'm like, oh, like, sorry. Okay, bye. And I didn't think like, okay, woman, go to the ER. And so
Oh, yeah. I didn't
I
think about
told
that.
I told my husband, I'm like, okay, you need to turn around and go here. Um, and it was the same time frame because we wouldn't have been going like, okay, maybe we go here. Is it here? Is it here? And it was just less stressful to turn around and go to Silverdale
Okay.
instead of in Tacoma. Um, and so we go there, and he pulls into the parking lot, and I'm like, okay, my water just broke. And he's like, okay, well, we're here. Like, good timing, we're here. And I'm like, okay, cool. So he parks, and he comes out, and he opens my door and gives me his hand. And I'm like, mm. He goes, babe, we have to go in. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't go in. He's coming. And the look on his face, he just goes, oh, and just books it across the parking lot.
Oh my gosh.
So he goes inside, and it took him maybe like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Probably had to get somebody, and they had to get somebody,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what's going on? Who's
But
what? Yeah.
because of COVID, before he could get a word out, they had to, here's a mask, here's a new mask, what's your temperature? Do you have any of these symptoms?
Oh man.
And he's like, okay, but my wife's in labor, like she's in the car, the baby's coming. And so finally he runs out, and there's like the charge nurse and a couple other nurses, and they've got a wheelchair, and they come out, and she goes, so I hear oh, you already had the baby. And I'm like, surprise.
Oh my gosh. Okay. What?
So
Stop. Okay. While he was getting his temperature check, what happened to you? Walk me through once he leaves.
I'm sitting in the car, and the door was open. Like, I left it open because I was hot in the car.
Yeah.
So the door's open, and I'm like, okay, something is not right. So I feel my pants, and there's this big bump there. And I'm like, that is a baby head. And so I pull my pants down to my knees, and I'm like, please, please, nobody park next to me because you're going to get a show.
Oh my God, imagine if you park next to you. Just imagine if you park next to you and it's like, what's going on? Oh, that's a baby.
Nobody look.
Didn't know I was going to see that today. Oh my gosh.
So
I can't imagine.
I pull my pants down, and I'm just sitting there. Like, my legs are all, like, I'm still inside the car. Luckily, we had a towel underneath me. But so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, that's his head. So I feel around, and I feel his umbilical cords wrapped around his neck. And I'm like, oh, good grief. So I unwrap the umbilical cord, and it's pitch black, so I can't see anything. I'm just like doing this by touch. So I'm like, okay, so I unwrap the umbilical cord, and then he comes the rest of the way out. And so I'm just holding him, but my shirt is like wet from all the fluids and stuff. I couldn't reach my sweater. It was like in the back seat. I couldn't reach it. I didn't have any blankets. They were still in the dryer at home. And so
should have packed my bag.
I know. And so I'm just like sitting there holding him and like rubbing him and trying to keep him warm. And like you would think, okay, Amanda, close the door, like I didn't think to close the door. I was still hot and not thinking about it.
How was your pain through this?
It hurt.
Were you like screaming in the back of a car? I just can't even.
I'm like in the front seat with my seatbelt on. Obviously, we're driving. And I'm like, Andrew, my husband, Andrew says, he goes, you looked like you were like Spider-Woman trying to climb the ceilings or something of the car because you're like, wah!
Yeah.
It hurt.
Yeah.
It did not feel good. And at one point, like, I don't cuss typically. And at one point, I just yelled, I go, F me!
I bet. I mean, that's just...
And I'm like, it hurts. And he goes, babe, that's how we got in this mess. And I said, really?
That's funny.
This is not the moment.
That's really funny.
Like, I thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, when a moment like that comes, you gotta take it.
I'm like, Andrew, shut up.
Man.
So they come out.
And you're holding your
And I'm
baby.
holding him and just like trying to rub him and keep him warm. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, he cried a little bit, but he's really quiet. He's really cold and I can't warm him up and I don't know what to do. And the umbilical cord was around his neck, but I got it unwrapped. And she's like, okay, don't worry. We got it. So they brought out like warm blankets with them and stuff. So they had blankets to wrap us in. And she goes, okay, go ahead and get in the wheelchair and we'll wheel you inside. And I'm like, but my pants are still off. And she's like, the placenta hasn't come out yet. He's still attached to me. And she's like, well, it's okay. We'll take care of it inside. And I'm like, you want me to be wheeled in, like with my pants down my knees? And
I mean, you already have a baby attached next.
I know. And she's like, well, we got blankets. We'll cover you up. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there holding the baby with blankets and like trying to like tuck it around. She's like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm like, my butt is cold. And she's like, okay, don't worry about it. We'll get you inside. I'm like, the world can't see this right now. And so they wheel me inside and the lady at the front desk is like, oh, congratulations. I'm like, thanks. I just want to go in the room now.
Do you still have to pay for delivery if you delivered it yourself?
You know, that was my big question.
It's like, well, I did your job, so.
They did not charge. They charged for like the cleanup.
Fair.
They didn't charge, and you know, we still had to use the delivery room because they had to deliver the placenta and they had to like get the baby under the warmer because he was cold. And
of course, yeah.
And so there was still that, but there wasn't any IV fluids. There wasn't, you know, any of that.
Well, they didn't get you the epidural, so that's.
Well, that's what. So I had planned on going natural so that I could be home sooner. Yeah. And I'm like, Andrew, if I have to go to the hospital, they better get me that epidural because I'm not doing this for nothing.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you did do it naturally.
I did.
In the car,
it wasn't in the water.
It wasn't in the water.
I didn't get my water birth.
How did I'm so baffled by this. Sometimes when I'm driving and I have to poop, it hurts and I'm like, man, this really sucks. This is a terrible pain. I wish they would have toilets inside the cars. I know none of this is reasonable. But that's just having reasonable. Thank you. But that's just pooping. Giving birth to a baby while your husband, the doctors, everyone's kind of away, so you're kind of just by yourself. And then the cord is wrapped and your pants are down, just like the most vulnerable position with your legs open.
Yep.
I mean, whew.
So the way there, I kept thinking I had to poop. Like, you know, when you're about to push the baby out, it feels like you're about to take like the dump of your life.
Yeah.
And I'm like squeezing my butt together and I'm like, I can't go to the hospital with poop in my pants. I'm about to poop myself. And so the whole way there, I'm like, okay, I've got a plan because I can't hold this in anymore. It hurts. I can't hold it in. I'm about to poop myself. But they like weigh you and then they have you go to the bathroom to get the gown on. And so I'm like, I will just, when I go to the bathroom, to get the gown on, I'll just throw
Poop
my
then.
stuff in the trash. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna know. Like, I'll wash myself up. Nobody will know I just walked in there with crap on myself.
Yeah.
And I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Turns out I didn't have to poop. I was having the baby.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't have to, I threw my stuff away. They're like, all right, go ahead and get your pants down. And I'm like, you can put that in the trash. I
Yeah.
don't want them. She's like, you don't want, we can put them in a bag and
Burn
you
it.
can take them home and wash them. And I'm like, I'm not that worried about it. They're like $8 yoga pants from Walmart.
We can let that go.
You can put them in the trash.
Although could be good memory pants. Maybe
I
not.
don't want to deal with the mess.
Yeah. It's just a lot of mess.
A lot of blood.
Yeah. I can't believe you did that on your own. Do you feel like a superwoman?
For the first couple days I did.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, I mean, part of it was instinct, I think. Okay, you feel something's different in your body. So obviously you want to check and make sure what's going on. So part of it was instinct. And then I'm like, and part of it was Grey's Anatomy.
Okay.
And they just kind of laughed at me and they're like, really? I'm like, really? There was one episode where the baby's cord was wrapped around and they're like, hey, we got to unwrap it. And another episode where there was this lady in labor and they told her, they're like, all right, you're almost here. Go ahead and put your legs up, relax. And I remember the whole car ride over thinking I cannot put my legs on the dashboard because if something happens and I crash, then this happened in Grey's Anatomy and it's not good. And
you were living Grey's Anatomy. Your life is Grey's Anatomy. Wow.
And so I'm like, I mean, at least what I watch on TV is educational, right?
That's the lesson we learned from this today, is that everyone needs to watch Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
I can't believe this.
So the first couple days, everyone's like, you're Wonder Woman, you're my hero. And I'm like, yeah, I just delivered my own baby
in a car.
By myself.
In a car. I don't.
I just did this. That's amazing. And then it kind of the adrenaline died down. And then I realized I should have closed the door.
That's what you thought.
I should have closed the door to help keep the baby dry or warm. I should have reached further for my sweater. I should have packed blankets. I should have done this and this and this. And eventually I'm like, okay, but really, who thinks okay, you're going to have a baby in the car. You need a plan for this.
I think you did more than enough and above and beyond. Of course, it's reasonable to always look back how you could have done things better, but nobody was ready or would have been prepared to what you went through. No. Well, Grey's Anatomy would have been.
That's true.
They know
That's
better.
True. They're pretty prepared.
They're prepared. They've got scripts. They know ahead of time.
And so, my niece, one of my nieces, she's 16 right now. And she goes, my sister's like, hey, Amanda just had a baby in the car. And she goes, so what'd they name him? Carson?
That's good.
I was like, are you?
That's good. That's a good joke. That is a good joke.
But that's a good one.
You got good jokes during this delivery. That's a good one.
And,
wow, Carson. It's a son in a car. Carson.
And so all my sisters, they just started calling him Carson.
That's genius.
And I'm like, okay, it's hilarious now. But at the time, I was so mad at myself that they're like, and I'm like, oh, Emmett did this. And one of my nieces goes, who? I'm like, Emmett, your cousin. And she's like, what? And then my sister goes, Carson. And she goes, oh, okay. And I'm like, I was so
mad,
upset about it. Because I was so upset about everything that I did wrong.
Yeah.
On this delivery I was like, I hate it. It was a funny joke, but 2 months later, it's not funny.
Yeah, I can see how it could feel disrespectful towards everything that happened. Plus you choosing, you have your own attachment to it. And you mentioned that what you did wrong. Do you still feel like you did something wrong?
No.
Okay. Because you didn't do anything. I mean, you are a hero. You know what I mean?
a couple
Girl.
months. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he just turned 1 a couple weeks ago,
Happy birthday.
and he's so funny. Um, so he just turned 1, but I mean, even up to like 5, 6 months, I was like, I should have done this better. I should
Yeah.
have done this. And part of it is like, you know, this isn't how it was planned. This isn't what I wanted. And part of it was like the depression. I had to get my meds adjusted, and I couldn't do that for a while because he had like failure to thrive and all
Mm.
this other stuff that we were dealing with.
Dang.
Um, and so I think part of it was like the depression played a big role in how I was processing everything or not
Yeah.
processing everything. But now I'm like, okay, when we have another one, if we have another one, I need blankets. I need to not put them in the trunk of the car.
I was just gonna say, leave an extra, like an emergency basket
I
in the trunk, but the trunk is not the place to put it.
I need to plan like pack before labor hits. I need to like be in walking distance of the hospital when labor starts because this
These
whole
are all good
thing
advice.
from like the first contraction that I felt after waking up after my nap until he was born was just under 3 hours.
Wow.
So I'm like, I need to like contraction, go to the hospital. No waiting until they're however many minutes apart and for however long.
Yeah.
Like, I just need to be at the hospital because if the next one is any sooner or the same, I'm not doing another car baby. I'm
No,
not
I don't
doing
blame
it.
you. I heard that your labor decreases in time dramatically with so
Yeah.
it's like could be 16 hours, 8 hours. I think my mom's third labor, I think my labor was with me was 3 hours. And so the fourth one could be a lot faster even if you were to have
Yeah.
another one. So have everything packed. Amanda, you pack your bag, okay? Ugh. I can't imagine. It's just I mean, you live through that. You know, you see that kind of stuff on TV and you're like, wow, that's crazy. But you actually live through it.
Yeah. It's I don't recommend it,
Well, yeah.
but I mean, if it's going to happen, put a towel down.
It's good to hear that it's because before I went into labor, I was thinking I was like, oh, I was going to do it natural without the epidural. And then when the pain hit me, I was like, oh, I have to do epidural. And then kept wondering, I'm like, how did people do this before time? It seems unimaginable. And I don't know if anyone's able to do it. And so hearing that you were able to, because then I was like, well, maybe if you're in the warm tub, it's a whole different. And I heard that it is. But I kept thinking, how did people do it back in the day? Like, it seems because when I was going through,
a lot.
yeah, it just seems like I was gonna get split open, and so it's kind of good to hear that like you made it out well. It wasn't the perfect experience, but like you are here today, and it is possible. If because I'm like, well, what if
Yeah.
this happens or what if that happens? It's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You don't make it to the hospital, and you've lived it, and so there is a way to get through it.
I was always like, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. Like,
Then you just do it, huh?
I, and everyone's like, well, why'd you push in the car or whatever? And I'm like, I didn't. Like, my body physically would not let me not push. My body
Wow.
was doing it.
That's so magical that it just knows.
And so, like, the car ride over, I'm trying to stay calm because, you tense up, then, like, the labor is worse because your muscles are trying to
Yeah. Open up
release
and
and
you're
you're tensing
forcing them.
them.
Yeah.
And
Makes
so I'm
sense.
trying to, and I'm like, okay, people say like picture the contraction waving over you, like flowing over you. And I'm like, yep, that's not working. Nope. Nope. Or they're like, picture your body opening up. And I'm like, I don't have to picture it. I feel it. It's opening. I feel it. There's no like picture this and picture that. And I'm like,
I'm living it.
I don't have to picture it. I feel it. I know what it's doing.
Yeah.
And picturing it is not helping me right now. So I just kept thinking, like, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do it. I don't have a choice. So I kept just, okay, breathe, breathe. And my husband laughs at me because I'm sitting there, I'm going, owie, 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 owie. And he's like,
I wonder what
okay.
it's like for him, because he's like, oh, I'm going to run to this hospital. Like, she'll be fine for 5 minutes. And then it's like, she gave birth in those 5 minutes.
So he came back out. He was like a deer in headlights when I'm like, the baby's coming. I can't get up.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs in there and he comes back out. He comes running out with the nurses and he's like,
Wow.
okay.
She was right.
Yeah.
She knows what she was talking about.
Yeah. And he's like, are you okay? Is everything okay? And I'm like, it's another boy.
Ta-da! Wow. I can't believe you lived through that. Like, I can't believe it happened in real life.
Apparently it's more common than like people think. I mean, it's not like common.
Yeah.
But
it does happen.
Yeah. The nurses were like, you're not the first one, and you won't be the last one, but it definitely isn't like
way
an
to
everyday
steal your thunder.
Occurrence.
They're like, it's fine. It happens all the time. Psh.
Well, no. So my little sister worked at a different hospital at the time. So it's like the same chain, but a different location. And I get a phone call or a text. I forget what one, but she's like, so you're famous. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, somebody at work was like, did you hear about this lady at this hospital that did this and this and this? And she had the baby in the car. And she's like, oh yeah, that's my sister.
Wow.
Like, no way. I'm like, really? It made it to like 3 hospitals over and like,
dang.
Okay. So she's like, so you're famous. I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, I bet. What a story. It does need to be shared. That's just bonkers to me. I literally can't put myself in that place. But I guess it's just when you have to do something and there is no other choice. You just...
it's literally like the baby is coming. You just have to do it.
You can't stop it. Hey, can you go back in? We're not ready. Your reservation's not ready yet.
Bud. Yeah. Hold on, bud.
Your table's not ready. We'll get you when your whole party's here. Man, I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. I'm proud of me.
As you should be. I mean, that's just a survival thing to live through and do. And thank you for being open and sharing it. Somewhere out there is going to help somebody along. Hopefully.
Check the umbilical cord.
Yeah. What is that still? I'm still not 100% on that. I don't like that happened. Well, I was thinking of the first umbilical cord that crushed. The changing of the umbilical cord. You know what's silly is I've heard of it in the shows where they're like, oh, the umbilical cord's wrapped around their heads. But then when I went to my OBGYN, she's like, oh, they just do it in shows. It doesn't really often happen. But I'm so glad that it did happen in the shows and you watched it because you knew what to do. How interesting. Yep. Well, what we learned today is that Grey's Anatomy is for everyone.
Yes.
Is what the takeaway is.
Like, I need a shirt that's like...
I Grey Anatomied myself. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't even know. Because there's some things that are like, trust me, I watch Grey's Anatomy. I'm basically a surgeon or whatever. But I'm like, I didn't perform surgery, but I like delivered my own baby.
You gotta make your own shirt.
I need like something. I just don't know what it would say.
When you come up with it, you let me know and I'll make you a shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't put it in words but if you see it, you message me and I'm going to make you a shirt because you deserve that shirt. You deserve so much more, but that's the least I can do for you.
Well, I've got my baby, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's about all that I
love that.
I need from that.
Yeah. I mean, I have to.
Safe.
God, I have to cut it short because my boob is swelling up to go feed my babies.
She's hungry.
She's hungry. That's okay.
Mine is too.
It's that milk o'clock. It's that milk o'clock. Thank you so much for talking to me. I know we didn't get to certain things, more so the PPD, PPA, and just more other stuff. So if you want to come back on, I'd love to have you back on and just talk further about other things. But thank you so much.
Message me. Let me know when.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this. And thank you for sharing your story. I mean, that's just bananas to me.
Well, thanks for letting me. It's kind of fun to talk about.
Well, I mean, what a story.
Yeah.
You reanatomied yourself. You delivered your own baby in a car in 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's insane.
We gotta get you that shirt. I gotta find the shirt for you.
And nobody parked next to me, so I didn't even give a show at the while doing it.
Wow. Wow. Things were really in your favor that day.
Seriously.
Nobody parked next to you.
Seriously.
That's funny. All right, Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I will send you a message, and then I'd love to have you back on. Talk more mom stuff.
Sounds fun.
Okay, go see your babies. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye. All right, thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.